All right, so good afternoon and welcome back to this the second part of my study of the nature and the power of your brain. So these are some of the topics that we explored the last time. There's a lot to explore when it comes to the brain, and I was saying that if you're able to lecture for at least 30 minutes on the workings of the brain, then you probably know how the brain works and you're able to utilize it to succeed in life. So in this second part, I'd like to explore visually what's going on inside of your brain, how it actually works, how you're using your brain to deploy your intelligence. So let's take a look specifically at how your brain works, and we can figure out how you can improve it. So basically, there are three components when it comes to your intelligence, which is how you're using your brain. So this is so important that I'm going to put it here because there's a researcher in AI called Shane Lake, and he's a co-founder of DeepMind. And he wrote his PhD on intelligence, and he discovered that there are actually 200 different definitions of intelligence. And I think that's appropriate because intelligence is so difficult to define. It's what you do with your mind, or your brain. So let me just attempt one definition of intelligence. It's how you're using your brain or your mind. But like I said before, we're going to focus on your brain because it's actually something that is tangible, right? It's physical, and your mind is really more complex. I don't even know how to describe your mind, but intelligence is basically how you use your brain, how you use your mind. And obviously, if you know in detail, as much detail as possible, your brain and your mind, then you're gonna be more intelligent. Okay, so there are three components to intelligence, or how you're using your brain, and I'm going to grossly simplify, but you can read up on it. But basically, let me just draw the different components. So we have here, and these are parts of your brain, right? Here we have your visual cortex. So this is a part of your brain that receives signals from your eyeballs. So this is where you first perceive what is going on in the environment. Whether you're reading a text, whether you're watching a sports event, whether you're interacting with somebody in person, your visual cortex will detect what is going on in front of you. And then the second element of your intelligence, as far as your brain is concerned, is the precuneus. And I'm simplifying, but this is the part of your brain that recognizes patterns, that recognizes problems. A problem is a pattern. It recognizes an event. It can identify, it can label an event, it can label an object, etc. And then there's the third part that is associated with memory, what you've learned in the past. So this part is called the caudate nucleus. I'm not sure if I pronounce it correctly, but it's not caudate, it's caudate nucleus. And this is a part that has the memories, everything that you've learned. So obviously it's like a database. If you're educated, if you read a lot of books, then your caudate nucleus will tend to be very developed. It's like a database, if you will. And so these are the three components of your brain, and as long as you focus on these three components and you develop them, you're going to be able to increase your intelligence. And that is very crucial, because today everyone is talking about AI, but nobody really defines intelligence in any specific or practical manner. And speaking of intelligence definition, I just want to put here Francois Chollet is probably the best one at defining intelligence. So I'm going to talk later on about how Francois is defining intelligence. But let's continue with these three objects. So just want to reiterate and mention what they what they stand for. So visual cortex is about perception. It's what you see, and this is important because imagine and we're going to talk about falsification later on. Just going to put it here, but imagine that you're not able to perceive. Let's say you're blind or you're blindfolded. Right away, your intelligence process is arrested because you're not able to see what's going on in your environment, and therefore the precuneus is not able to recognize anything. There's nothing to process, right? Because this is really it's like a chain reaction. It starts with the it starts with the precuneus, it starts with the visual cortex, and it goes to the precuneus, and then it goes to the caudate nucleus. So this is the chain reaction, and then from the caudate nucleus, I guess it leads to action that you can perform. So I'm going to put it here, and from the action you're getting a result, and then you see the result with your caudate nucleus. So let me just create here an action. So you're taking action, and you see let's say I'm going to put the results over here. And by the way, I want to recommend The Psychology of Everyday Things. This is a book by Donald Norman. We'll explore that later on. Just want to put it here. And so from your action that comes from a response that you're choosing from your caudate nucleus, from your memory, you're getting a result or results. And from the results, you can see the results. So we have to draw, and then it's like a loop. But can you see that intelligence is something that you can actually understand? And like I said, this is a grossly simplified description of or representation of your intelligence. Okay, so please don't hold me to it. I'm sure that if you read about the precuneus online or the caudate nucleus, it's going to be much richer. But I want to simplify it because you don't need to be a neuroscientist. You just need to understand the steps. And once you understand the steps, you can actually improve each step so that you can use your intelligence in a way that is practical, in a way that results in your achieving your goals. Because it doesn't matter what your goals are. It really doesn't matter whether you're trying to lose weight, whether you're trying to find a date or find a wife or husband, whether you're trying to become spiritually enlightened and you try to find peace, whether you're parenting your kids, whether you're solving a problem or you're finding a job, trying to find a job, you're trying to get freelance contracts, whether you're setting up a business, you're trying investing, it's always the same. It starts with your visual cortex, and then you recognize a pattern or a problem, and then you decide on a response. Sorry, I'm thinking of OODA loop. You're deciding on a response based on the responses that you have available. You take action because you have to select the response first, and then you take action, and then you see the results. And then the results will change the environment, will change your situation, and then you look at your situation. It could be a balance sheet, it could be a net worth, your bank account, right? You look at the situation, you see it, and then you repeat this. So anyone who understands that this is how intelligence happens will be able to control, his intelligence by controlling these three parts of your brain. Okay, these are the three parts of your brain. So I'm going to put them in a different color so that we understand that it's what's going on inside of your brain, and nobody can see what is going on inside of your brain. So you're, in a way, you're in charge of what's going on here, and therefore you have to understand your brain, because even the best teachers cannot get inside of your brain. But your coach can help you with actions, taking the right action, because your coach can see the actions that you're taking, and the results. You can have advisors and consultants help you to understand, is this a good result, is this a bad result. So we're going to put the results in blue, and I'm going to change the color to white here. So you're in charge of what's going on inside of your brain, and the actions. Your coach can help you, teachers can help you, results, consultants can help you, advisors can help you, investors can help you if they're angel investors. Okay, so let's examine in greater detail the functions of these three parts of your brain. So like I said, the visual cortex is perceiving. You have to open your eyes. You have to read something. So for example, people who are not literate, they're missing out on a lot of information because they cannot read books. And then there are people who are literate, can read books, but they don't read books. So they're also affecting negatively their perception. Instead of reading books, for example, they would watch a YouTube video, but YouTube videos doesn't provide a lot of information. Okay, and the rate of information transfer is very slow, because I can read probably 3 to 5 times faster than a YouTuber is speaking. So every time I watch a YouTube video, I'm slowing down my learning. But if I read a book, or if I read something written, I can go like 5 times faster, and I can backtrack, right? I can stop. But when I'm watching a YouTube video, I'm forced to keep pace with the rate of speech of the speaker. And then perception is not the end of the story, because the second step is the precuneus. So this is the pattern recognition. So you can recognize a problem if you've been trained to recognize that problem before. And also recognize the root cause of the problem. And we'll talk about that later on. But for example, let me just... Okay, so you recognize a problem or a root cause, and here you have to do a good job of recognizing a pattern. So to give you an example, so I'm having a problem with my software here. Sorry, just a minute, please. Yeah, so let's unpack this. Just to give you an example of when pattern recognition could go wrong. So let's say that somebody insults you. Okay, so we're going to say that somebody insults you, or no, let's too radical. Let's say somebody says, let's say your husband says something like, you should manage your time better, and you're the wife. And so we're going to learn later on that all events are neutral. You just have to perceive the events and take in the information. But what's happening is that you recognize that pattern, that speech, as an insult. And so obviously, because you label that statement as an insult, obviously your response is going to be one of anger. And depending on your personality, based on your anger, you might snap back, how dare you, and then your husband's gonna sleep on the couch that night, or you have self-control, your action, because you always have choices. Your action can be, you keep it inside and you resent your husband, and you show, through your facial expression, you show that you didn't appreciate what he just said because you take it as an insult. But however, if you train yourself, let's say, you have some emotional intelligence training, or you're naturally gifted with emotional intelligence, or you went to one of my webinars on SGR, which stands for Stimulus Gap Response. I'm just going to put it here. I'm giving a webinar on stimulus gap response to help you to control your emotions and achieve peace. So instead of recognize it as an insult, instead you recognize as caring. Okay, you recognize that your husband or your wife cares about you, and that's why they mentioned that you should learn to manage your time better. Okay, so because you recognize that as a sign of caring, the response from your caudate nucleus is no longer anger, but it's love, or something close to that. And because your response is one of love, then your action will reflect it. You will say something like thank you. You will say thank you, and do you have tips on time management? So it's a productive action, and then from your action, which is you're uttering these words, the results might be, your husband or your wife or your coworker will, mention something. That's the result of your action, and you implement it, and then the following day, the following week, you manage your time better. You create a calendar, etc. So can you see that this is a very simple everyday event? Somebody says something, you recognize it as meaning something, and you respond to the meaning that you've created. So the meaning here is generated by you. Okay, you always have a choice to respond in whatever way you want to respond, but it depends on your pattern recognition. So if you have people in your life who often feel anger, who feel depressed, who feel negative emotions, that's the response, and that's because they have the wrong pattern recognition system. And so you want to improve that system, and then once you recognize correctly the events or the words that somebody else is saying, you interpret it in a way that is positive, then you can have the corresponding response, because here you can see that but by the way, you can have a negative pattern that you recognize mistakenly, like an insult, but you can still choose to respond with love. Okay, it's not because you believe that someone is insulting you that automatically you have to respond with anger. You always have a choice, because it depends on how you've trained your caudate nucleus. But you can see here that it's three different things, and maybe for the action, it's three different parts of your brain. Some people, for example, they can't stand other people because they don't have a good pattern recognition system, right? And so they can't stand people, and that's why the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, he said that hell is other people. No, hell is not other people. Other people are not hell. Hell is when your pattern recognition doesn't work and you interpret everything or most things in a negative way because your ego is fragile. So hell is not other people. And people who believe that will tend to avoid society. They don't go into social situation because they think that it's hard to deal with other people. It's not hard. It's just that your system here that recognizes pattern is not well trained. So those people will avoid people, and therefore perception is zero. You're not seeing anyone. And same thing with a lot of people. There seems to be a pandemic in Canada, I don't know in the US, but people are lonely. They're lonely because they refuse to see other people. Because when they see other people, they don't know how to recognize the patterns. They don't know how to respond. So loneliness is not a loneliness problem. It's a problem with these three parts of your brain. And nobody at school taught you how to, leverage and use properly these three parts of your brain. So that's an example in everyday situation. So let's take an example that is maybe more germane to our Facebook group. And you really, you can just brainstorm with your friends and discuss and strategize on these three parts of your brain, because let me tell you, it doesn't matter what area of life you're struggling, whether it's spirituality, money, jobs, dating, health. It's usually, these three parts of your brain that you have to improve. Okay, so let's take a look at you want to launch a business. So you perceive your business situation, right? And you perceive other people around you. You see that everyone has, a website. And so, you recognize that as something that you need to do. And therefore, so you perceive, let's say you perceive your current life, no website, and you see others have a website, and the pattern that you incorrectly recognize, or the interpretation that you are making, is that I should have a website. And your response, is you create a website. Your response and your action, you create a website. And the result, either your website is helping you to attract customers or it doesn't. And so based on the results, you are validating whether you took the right action in creating a website. So it doesn't matter how you use, well, it matters, but I mean, the way to recognize whether you're using these three parts of your brain correctly is to look at the results. This is really important. Dr. Phil on the Oprah show, and eventually he had his own show, often he would encounter someone who is so stubborn and doesn't want to change, and Dr. Phil would often say, how's that working out for you? He's being a little bit sarcastic, of course, because he's helping the person to become aware that if your approach is so good, well, why are you on this show? You're on this show because I am here to give you advice. I'm here to correct your pattern recognition and give you solutions and responses, right? So Dr. Phil would, as a way to help them to become aware, how's that working out for you? And they have to acknowledge that the results that they're getting are not very good, and therefore now they can begin to listen to Dr. Phil, who's going to help them to interpret in a new way, and also he's going to help them to generate new responses. So here we have responses, we have solutions that have worked for other people, we have case studies, we have memories, etc. And this is typically the work of education. Education is supposed to give you all the responses, solutions, theories, and then you have a greater database of knowledge, so to speak, and you can choose from this database, this storehouse of knowledge, right? Because if you don't have a lot of education, if you haven't read a lot of books, your responses are going to be very limited, as opposed to someone, let's say like me, who has read over 1,000 non-fiction books. So I have more memories, more responses than you. And speaking of memories, you can have memories based on your experiences, or you can have memories based on other people's experiences or their books. So obviously, if I've read 1,000 non-fiction books, it's like I have more memories than you, because if you've learned only from experience, obviously your experience is very limited, right? It's very specific. So your memory, your knowledge base is much smaller than my knowledge base. So that's one of the first thing to understand about this caudate nucleus. And this is so important that I'm going to draw a diagram so that you can see the difference between someone who has read a lot of books like Elon Musk or Dr. Jordan Peterson. Let's say that your caudate nucleus is very small. Okay, so it's tiny because for whatever reason you don't like to read books, and for reason, at school, this is probably one of the main criticism I have of the school system. It's not it forces students to read what they don't want to read, as opposed to the Montessori method where they allow children to do whatever they love to do. So your caudate nucleus is very small because you haven't read a lot of books. And in fact, in the United States, the average American has read only one non-fiction book per year, as opposed to the American CEO who typically reads like over 50 books per year. So if we compare your caudate nucleus or your knowledge database to somebody like Jordan Peterson or Elon Musk, they've read books, tons and tons of books since they were kids. So obviously they have a much bigger knowledge database than you. And like in the case of Elon Musk, when he started SpaceX, he didn't know anything about aeronautics and aerospace and rocket design, but he began to read. A reporter asked him, how did you come to understand so much about the rocket industry? He said, well, I just read a lot of books. And he talked to a lot of smart people, but mostly it's about reading books. And so it shows you that it doesn't matter what your age is, you can read books. Unfortunately today, people they go to YouTube because it's convenient. They can get YouTube on their phone, it's free. They don't make the effort to go to a public library where all the books are there, and they can just sit down and they can read books, and they can learn to read faster. To me, that's the secret to success, or at least to my success, and that's a secret of the success of people like Jordan Peterson and Elon Musk. Anyways, that's how you can improve your intelligence, by reading books, not TikTok. You have to let go of TikTok. If you're serious about your life, if you want to make money, let go of TikTok, let go of Facebook and YouTube. You can use Facebook like what I'm doing right now. I'm promoting and broadcasting and publishing, but abandon X, formerly Twitter, or even on LinkedIn. I don't read what people post on LinkedIn. It's perfectly useless because I perceive what's going on LinkedIn. I recognize it as people just voicing their political opinions. It's perfectly useless. So my response is just to ignore, whatever people are posting on LinkedIn. People are just wasting other people's time, which is tragic. So anyways, this is just to show you that your caudate nucleus might be very small compared to the caudate nucleus of your competitors, right? So you have, whoops, oh shoot, sorry, my software just crashed. Let me just give me a minute. I'm gonna reboot it. So you have to be aware of these three components of your brain, and there is so much I can tell you. And you look at all the intelligent people, they definitely they yeah, okay, sorry, we're back. Okay, so you look at intelligent people, and they maybe they don't know it, but in some way they've improved the way that these three systems work together. Okay, so that's that's what you have to understand, and that's what you have to work with. How do you perceive? And speaking of perception, let me just give you an example of how you can perceive this. Imagine that someone has a speed of reading, and that person can read one book per week, one nonfiction. Okay, and you compare that to another person who is faster, who can read 5 books per week, and you compare that person to another person who can read, like in my case, I can read 5 books per day. I can speed read. So that's the rate of perception. Who do you think is going to fare better? The person who's a slow reader, or the person who's a fast reader who can read 5 books per day, and that's like 25 books per week. So obviously this person, all things being equal, this person is superior because he perceives more. But then it depends, it's not the end of the story, because maybe this person who reads 5 books per week, he has learned how to memorize the key ideas that he's reading, so he's enriching his cognitive nucleus. But this person who reads 5 books per day or 25 per week, he read 5 times more books, but he forgets everything that he's reading. So my point is that it's not necessarily how many books you're reading or how many people you talk to. That's just one component. There's also the cognitive nucleus. It's your capacity to memorize what you've learned. But in general, if you're exposed to more books, if you've read more white papers, not like just websites, but if you're reading more books, obviously you're enriching your brain at a rate that is better than other people who are reading fewer books. Okay? Or, this person has read 1 book per week compared to another person who's watching tons of YouTube videos. But like I said, YouTube videos are inferior in quality when compared to a book. Then this person is winning because he's reading a book as opposed to watching TikTok videos. Okay, so that's how you can improve your perception. Pattern recognition, it comes from education, it comes from training. You have to be able to correctly interpret what is going on. To give an example, it's a very strange example, but there was a group of 3 people, like 1 guy and 2 women, who came to me, and they needed help to set up their graphic design business or something. And after I spoke to them and I listened to them, I recognized the pattern that they are not aligned, because it's a new venture, so everyone is excited, but they were talking about different things. So I gave them the homework. I said, guys, I give you 1 week to, each one of you write on a piece of paper what you really want this new company to be, in 3 to 5 years, and compare your notes and come back to me. And so the following week they came back to me and they said, Peter, you're right. We have a different vision for the company. So you know what? We're not going to start the company at all. And so, I recognize a pattern that most people, even consultants, would not recognize. And the pattern that I recognized was that they're not aligned. Their vision is not aligned. So it's very exciting to launch a company together. Everyone is exciting. Everyone's passionate. But a new company is not a picnic. You're not going out to a picnic where you're having fun with your friends and your husband and your wife. It's like you're going to war, and you have to have the same objective. So my pattern recognition was so refined that I recognized a problem that they didn't even know they had a problem. And if they had gone to another coach or consultant, maybe the other coach and consultant would not have recognized that problem, that pattern. And the problem that I recognized quickly was that they are not aligned, and I helped them to realize that they're not aligned, and therefore they should go their own way and not, so basically I just saved them like 2 years and 3 years of hardship. They would have launched a company and they each do their own thing, but they're not aligned. So this is just an example of how you can develop your pattern recognition. But pattern recognition requires training. It requires experience and education. Whereas perception, it just requires that you read a book or that you open your eyes and you see what's going on. And sometimes people today, they open their eyes, but they watch news on CNN, they watch YouTube news, they watch what Donald Trump is doing, what politicians are doing, but they're perceiving the wrong things, right? So they're directing their attention to the wrong thing. So here you have to perceive and gather information that is useful and important and knowable. So let me just talk about this for a minute, because perception is not just a matter of, opening your eyes and seeing what's going on in front of you. You have to choose the right information sources. So the trick is that you have to seek, and I mean seek like proactively. I don't mean like you open your YouTube application and you see whatever YouTube presents to you or whatever Facebook presents to you. You have to actually go out there into a public library or onto the internet, and you have to search on Google for information that is, so seek information that is, and this is really valuable. I learned this from reading a book on the biography of the great Warren Buffett. He's an investor, so you can't really go wrong when you learn from Warren Buffett. So his method was to seek information that is important to you, and number two, information that is knowable. This is so crucial because most people, what they're seeing on TikTok or YouTube or Facebook is not important. You can read for 5 minutes or half an hour, you can read what your Facebook friends are doing, but that's not important. It's knowable because they tell you, and usually they tell you the truth. It's knowable, you can find out what they're doing, your friends, but it's not important. Okay, so you have to realize that you have to seek information that is important. How do you know that it's important? Well, it's important if it's relevant to your goals. So you have to know what your goals are. So if my goal is to become, let's say, a billionaire by the end of 2026, then I have to find information about technologies, about business models, about new products. So that's important to me. So you have to know your goals. If you don't have a goal, then you have no way to figure out what information is important to you. There are people, like 95% of people don't have a written financial goal. They don't know how much money they want to make. So as a result, they're just wasting time on TikTok. They're wasting time on Netflix, YouTube. They don't have a goal. So for them, any information is good enough. Any information that is entertaining, titillating, information about celebrities, information about AGI, about artificial intelligence, robots, all of that is interesting, but it's not important. Like the Optimus robots is not important to your goals, not for now. AGI, the AI apocalypse, not important to you. It might be exciting, it might be knowable, but it's not important. So you have to seek information that is important to you. If your goal is to become rich in this life, and that's a very broad goal, right? You have to define what you mean by rich. Some people feel they're very rich if they have $100,000 in their bank account. Other people need to have like $1 million. So you have to define your goals, and then you can figure out who has the information. If you want to become rich and succeed in business, I have the information. So my Facebook group is important to you. My information is important to you because I'm all about business and value creation and wealth making and fortune building. So you have to talk to the right people. If you have friends who are not serious about money, like, you should talk to them less and focus on making new friends who know about money, who know about investing, who know about how to build businesses and how to create new products. Those are the people that you need to talk to because they have important information for you, given your goal of becoming rich. So that's the first step. Information that is important. And second, information that is knowable. So for example, I'm investing in the stock market, so I need information on how companies are doing, but there's a certain information that is not knowable, and it's called insider information, right? It's not knowable. Or, I want information on how OpenAI is going to create GPT that will help me to build a business from scratch. That is important, but it's not knowable. it's not knowable with any certainty. People can speculate about what OpenAI can do, what it can create. People can speculate about Mira Murati, the former chief technical officer at OpenAI. She's creating a new company, or Ilya Sutskever. It might be interesting, but it's not knowable what they're doing. It's important to know what they're going to create, but it's not knowable. And so you can go on YouTube and you can listen to hundreds of interviews by Sam Altman or other people like Demis Hassabis from DeepMind, but what they're telling you is not facts. They're speculating, right? So it's not knowable. So you have to find information that is important and knowable. Like, for example, if you can learn email marketing or copywriting from teachers like myself, that is important if you want to make money online, and that is knowable. Okay, so perception here is about seeking information courses that are important to you given your goals, and that is knowable, that somebody can actually teach you and present to you the facts. Here's what you can do. These are the facts. These are not speculation. So that's just perception, right? After that, you have to train yourself to recognize problems, to recognize opportunities, because a lot of times, what other people see as problem, you see it as, an opportunity to make money. So your pattern recognition is superior to other people, because, other people will learn about the problems of the world, and they will recognize that, that's a problem. I don't want to be concerned with other people's problem. But if you recognize it as an opportunity to make money, then you are using your precunious in a way that is advantageous to you. So let me give you a practical example. There's a lot of talk about, young people, let's say graduates, not finding a job. So if you're a parent, you're concerned, right? But if you're not a parent, you see that as a problem and you're thinking, hey, that's not my problem. I'm 40 years, I have a career, not for me. But if you, like me, you recognize that as an opportunity to train them on AI and prompt engineering, etc., then, we're talking about a lot of money. So can you see that it depends on how you interpret events? Graduates not finding a job, that's a problem for them, but it's an opportunity for me. It's an opportunity for me, and therefore, I can make money with that. And sometimes I come across, like, my brain works in a strange way. I came across a guy in India who somehow created a Ponzi scheme, and there are people in India who are so desperate that they're investing $100 to get into the Ponzi scheme of this guy. And this guy apparently, forgot his name, but he wants to create apps that will replace Google and Facebook and all of that. And they discovered, the law found out that he's creating a Ponzi scheme, and still there are people who are desperate enough. They still defend him. They still believe that this guy, this fraudster, is going to make them rich. So I was reading that, and my interpretation is that I should sell, my training and my courses and my applications to desperate people. Why? Because they are more eager to believe that I can help them. They're more desperate. Like, if I sell to people in developing countries, I sell them something for $100 or $50, they're more likely to buy because they're more desperate. Of course, in my case, it wouldn't be a Ponzi scheme. It would be like legitimate courses that will help them. But that's the pattern I recognize. I recognize an opportunity, and therefore my response to that opportunity, my response here, because I have a creative interpretation, my response would be, maybe to create my artificial business intelligence for India or for other countries where there's a lot of people who are desperate to make money online. So can you see that my pattern recognition is so different? When I read the news about young people not finding a job, when I read the news about a Ponzi scheme, I can still turn it into a positive interpretation, leading to a positive response from me and a positive action. So even though I'm perceiving the same thing that you're perceiving, because my pattern recognition is more creative, I'm able to use my caudate nucleus to, come up with a better response, a more profitable response. Can you see how intelligence works? The three have to work together. And so, let me just share with you another diagram that will drive home how these three work together. And, I've been talking for some time now, but can you see that the person who understands the nature and the function of these three parts of your brain, these are actually neurons in your brain, right? Can you see that such a person has an advantage over other people? Like when ChatGPT is gonna, when OpenAI will come up with, GPT 6 or 10 or 20, I see AI as an elevator. It's gonna bring people to a new floor, right? But everyone is going to be on the same floor because most likely these large language models will be very affordable. $20 a month, or even if OpenAI charges $100 per month, that is very affordable because you can make so much money with that. So it's kind of like AI will pay for itself. So basically it means that anyone will be able to afford, even a subscription cost of $100 a month, and therefore the competition is not going to be which AI you're using. Everyone will have the same AI in the same sense, in the same way that today everyone has almost access to a personal computer that has sufficient power to make money online. Like someone can buy a $300 laptop and do digital marketing, as opposed to my $2,000 gamer PC. My gamer PC is very powerful, but there's extra power that is useless when it comes to e-commerce. You use Shopify, you use YouTube, you use Teachable, you're going to be the same as me. So in the same way, in the future, people will have large language models that are similar in power. And so what is going to differentiate you from other competitors is how you use your brain. If you're using these three parts of your brain in a way that is different from other people, and you grow your capability when it comes to these three components of your brain, obviously you're going to eclipse your competition because these three parts of your brain are more developed, and that's how you win in the marketplace. So anyways, let me just go back to my my point. So different people will, let's say you have two people in a room and they perceive more or less the same things. Okay, so let me just, but the two of them will have a different response. So this is person number one. She recognizes something as a problem, for example, and she's gonna have one response. But another person will have a different response. So these are two different people. This is person one and this is person two. And if the person number two took the time to develop her pattern recognition, then she has more interpretations about the same event, and here she also has more memories, more learnings, more case studies, more responses to choose from, as opposed to person number one, who's recognizing a pattern, the same pattern she's recognized before, and she doesn't change. So these are two different people. Okay, so let's talk about the person who is smart over here and see what is actually happening in her case. In her case, when she perceives an event, she can either recognize that as pattern number one, or she can recognize it as a second pattern, or as a third pattern. So she has more flexibility when it comes to her interpretations. Okay, she's not, immediately recognizing it as pattern number one, and that's it. That's the end of the story. She goes to her response mechanism. No, these are people who are very inflexible in their interpretation. Here, when you become more creative, you can interpret the same event in a different way, right? And oftentimes you have to give yourself time, because if you just react right away, you're going to recognize it as pattern number one. But if you give yourself a few seconds more, it's going to dawn on you that there's a second interpretation, a third interpretation. So let me just put that. Pattern can be an interpretation. And interestingly, there was a study by Edward de Bono where he came into high schools where there was a lot of delinquent boys, right, who are prone to criminal activity. And he trained them on how to develop their creativity, and they discovered that those boys eventually abandoned their criminal activities because they recognized that there are different interpretations. Their first interpretation might be, if I want to make money, I have to steal, I have to do something illegal, I have to get into a gang. So that's the pattern that they've received from their gang. But after Edward de Bono trained them on how to develop new patterns, new interpretations, for example, if I'm poor, I can get a job, I can create stuff, I can sell stuff, I don't have to just engage in criminal activity. And then, those boys, because they were more flexible in their interpretation of their situation as being financially struggling, they were able to come up with new responses which are not criminal, new behaviors which are not criminal. So you can see that by training your precuneus, you can develop new methods for recognizing patterns, new interpretations. Okay, so this person has new interpretations, and that will lead to new responses. So this is how it works. So the responses here, I'm just going to put it here, the responses can be solutions that you've learned in books or from other people. But like I said, a book is the best way to learn, because when you think about it, a book is where somebody has spent like a number of years of his life, and they put into the form of a book the best knowledge that they have. So when you're reading a book, you're learning from the best that someone has ever produced. Because to publish a book, you have to go through the publishing house, you have to go through a lot of quality control processes. So a book is really a compressed treasure. But when you watch a YouTube video these days, a lot of people go on YouTube, they just live stream whatever comes to their mind. It has very low value. So anyways, you read a lot of books, and therefore you have more responses, you have more solutions. Now these solutions are theoretical because they're used in other people's cases, so you have to choose the right solution for yourself. And you have more memories about what works and what doesn't work. You have case studies, you can think about it. And this is system number 2. I'm going to talk about that later on. So let me just put it here. System number 2 as opposed to system 1. System 1 is when you react reflexively. Something happens, your system 1 kicks into action and you do something. But system 2 is more like something happens and you take the time to think about it, you analyze, and then you formulate an appropriate response after careful thinking. So that's system number 2. I'll talk more about system 1 and system 2 later. So this is how it works. If you want to improve your intelligence, you have to develop flexibility and creativity in terms of interpreting what you're seeing, what you're reading. Okay, you have to have more creativity and responsiveness, flexibility, and you also need to read a lot of books so that you can enrich your database of potential responses, potential solutions, and your memories and case studies will help you to think in a way that is richer. Okay, and of course, after you choose the right response, then you can take action. action is really important, because without action, you don't really know if your response is correct. And from your actions, you're going to generate results, and the results will feed back into your perception. You have to perceive what's going on in the environment. This is how they train, by the way, how they train AI today with reinforcement learning. It's the same process. But we don't care about large language models. That's not our job. Our job, I think that, a lot of people think that AI is going to become more and more powerful, so I don't have to do anything. No, like I said, AI is just an elevator. AI is going to bring all humans to a certain floor, right? But once we are on that floor, you're going to be competing with other human beings, and therefore you have to learn how your brain actually works. My guess is that this is the first time that you're hearing someone talk about the visual cortex, the precuneus, and the caudate nucleus. This is the first time you see this. I should actually write a book about this. And if this is the first time you see this, and this is only like 5% of what I know about the brain, can you imagine the knowledge, the valuable knowledge that your teachers, your parents, your friends, your coworkers, your boss, can you imagine what they have not been telling you? Not because they're malicious, it's just that they don't know. Like, my teachers didn't know about this. My parents don't know about this. My siblings don't know about this. My co-workers, my bosses don't know about this. I had to learn on my own. It took me years to capture all this information. And so, you can benefit, but you have to be serious about your intelligence. Like I said, you have to begin to, quit TikTok, quit YouTube, and get into a local library. And the beauty about local libraries is that, it's a very quiet place. And once you go there, you took the time to go there, right? It might take you half an hour, and you're sitting down, and you have tons of books around you. You have no distraction. There's no notifications by phone. There's no distraction like TV, etc. You're just reading books. And after a while, it's like going to the gym. It becomes a habit, and you start to read books, you start to take notes, and you become smarter, as opposed to other people who are just watching YouTube videos, and they're just watching stupid TikTok videos. Entertaining, but it's stupid. It's stupid because today you have the potential to increase your intelligence and make so much money. You don't learn anything by watching a TikTok video. You're just wasting your time 30 seconds at a time. And so, in a strange way, TikTok and companies like that, they know your brain. They will make you perceive something that is controversial, that is sensational, and you recognize that as something of value, but I recognize it as something that is junk. So let's consider that this is something that, especially if you're a parent, you want to teach your kids. So let's say we all perceive TikTok videos, okay, and most people will see it as entertaining, right? I see it as stupid. Or, to be accurate, I used to be addicted to TikTok just for a few days, but I see it as entertaining and stupid. So because I recognize TikTok for what it is, I'm more intelligent than the TikTok people, okay? Because I see what they're trying to do. I see that they're trying to feed me videos that are likely to get me to engage, but I see that as entertaining, there's no doubt, but it's stupid. And therefore my response will be to uninstall TikTok. But the response of these people who are very rigid in their thinking, they're easily controlled, they're useful idiots, they're zombies, they're useful idiots because they're just making TikTok more powerful. The responses of these people is to keep on scrolling, and as they watch more TikTok videos, they find it, oh, it's so entertaining, they share it with their friends, and then they contaminate their friends, and then they keep on watching, and it becomes like an addiction. You can't give up anymore. But you have to understand that TikTok is entertaining and stupid, and so unless you want to become stupid, you should abandon TikTok. Now, if you're an influencer and if you're selling products on TikTok, that's a different story. That's a different story. There are many entertainers and teachers who teach on YouTube, and they're selling products, so that's smart. But if you don't have a product to sell, TikTok is stupid. Okay, Like, please abandon TikTok if you want to become smart. If you read like 30 minutes, you read a book, I guarantee you're going to become smarter than 30 minutes of watching TikTok videos. And nowadays we have like Facebook and YouTube also have shorts, and I admit I fall into that trap often. I watch a short on YouTube, I watch a short on Facebook, and it becomes like I can't control myself. I just keep watching. But I, like, even in my case, I know better, I still fall into that trap. So my point is that your brain is understood by the big tech companies out there, the Facebook, the TikToks, the LinkedIn. They understand your brain better than you do, and therefore they're able to control your brain. If you have a job right now, it's probably because you don't know how to use your brain. So let me just put that down. If you have a job, it means you don't fully understand and or control. And that is the truth, because people who have a job don't know how they can improve their situation. They don't know how to make money, and therefore they have no choice but to show up and do a job, whether it's a government position, whether it's a position in the private sector. They just don't know how to improve their brain in order to create value and make money on the internet. And so they don't fully understand or control their brain. Now, obviously, if you're a PhD graduate and you're a researcher at OpenAI, you understand your brain probably better than most people, but you still don't understand your brain enough to train yourself to become an independent entrepreneur. It's really about how you control your brain. And there's no limit to how smart you can be. And this is why I'm gonna say something controversial here, but I'm gonna say that there are actually, I found a LinkedIn group called Elon Musk fans, and there are tens of thousands of people, and I'm gonna have to teach them how to use their brain. But I often see people, Elon is amazing. Like, even among investors and entrepreneurs, is amazing. He's a genius. The late Charlie Munger said that Elon Musk is a certified genius. It may be true. It's probably true. But instead of, revering people like Elon Musk or Albert Einstein or Warren Buffett, instead, why don't you try to develop a brain that is similar to theirs? Because when you admire Elon Musk, which is fine, I admire him too, your interpretation here, right? Your interpretation is he's smart, he has a high IQ, he was born with that brain. My situation is different. I'm stupid, I'm easily controllable, I'm gonna go on TikTok and just entertain myself until I die. I'm not gonna make more money, I'm just gonna entertain myself because I'm not like Elon Musk. I'm not like Jeff Bezos, And so you prejudge yourself to be less smart than they are. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that in this lifetime you're going to become as smart as Elon, because as you're trying to get smarter, he's going to get smarter, right? So it's very unlikely that you're going to catch up to Elon Musk. But I don't know, maybe with AI you could catch up to him. Like, for example, without Stockfish, there's no way for me to beat Magnus Carlsen. Like, this guy is ranked like 28, 35 something, and I'm ranked like 1400, and sometimes I go down to 1300. Like, that's like hundreds of games. I'm never gonna reach Magnus Carlsen, who's 28, 35. But you know what? Stockfish is somewhere like 34,000. So that's Stockfish. So if I use Stockfish, I can beat Magnus anytime, any day. Right? So it is possible for me to use AI to maybe one day become smarter and more productive, and I can run like 50 companies while Elon is running only like 3 or 4 companies right now. But of course, the bad news is that Elon has access to the same AI, right? So he has access to Grok. So I'm toast. So anyways, my point is not that you're going to be able to reach his level, but whatever your IQ is right now, and I talk about IQ, but that's not the only story. There's emotional quotient. There's business IQ also. Whatever your intelligence is right now, you can probably increase it by 10 or 20% or more. So, you can do that if you understand these parts of your brain. And, these are just 3 parts. There are more parts to the brain, but I just want to keep it simple and explain to you that there's a visual cortex. This is where you're perceiving information. There's the precuneus. This is where you recognize patterns. And there's a caudate nucleus where you're selecting from the responses in your memory. They have to be inside of your memory, otherwise you don't have access to those responses. And so if you want to improve your brain with ChatGPT, you can certainly do that, but it means that you have to learn how to do prompt engineering so that ChatGPT can show you answers and you can interpret those answers and you can take action. ChatGPT can also provide you with responses, right? You can say, okay, my situation right now is, let's say I'm earning $80,000 a year. This is your situation. I want to become an entrepreneur and create a business that will make me $500,000 a year. That's the situation, the pattern. And so you're asking ChatGPT to provide responses because ChatGPT knows much more than you do. And from the responses that ChatGPT gives you, it can give you like 3 different strategies for becoming a millionaire. From those responses, you can decide to take action, and then you will get the results, which means you're going to become a millionaire at some point. So, ChatGPT is very good for generating responses, but you still have to select the right response and take action. So anyways, I'm going to end here. I have to go for my second cup of coffee, but I try to explain to you the 3 parts of the brain, and as you think about it and as you brainstorm with your friends, you're going to realize that there is so much about your brain that you didn't know, and you're going to begin to read books about these 3 parts of your brain. You're going to begin to read books by Edward de Bono, the creativity guru, or you're going to watch videos on YouTube by Francois Chollet. Especially, there's a video that he gave at the Y Combinator. It's available on YouTube for free. Extremely powerful. So I'm going to conclude this live stream by giving you Francois Chollet's definition of intelligence. Basically, it's the rate at which you acquire new skills in new situations. So intelligence, like Francois would argue that ChatGPT is not intelligent. It doesn't have intelligence. It has skills. Okay, so he would argue that ChatGPT has skills, not intelligence, because ChatGPT cannot independently learn by itself, at least not now. So for him, intelligence is the rate at which you acquire new skills in new situations. And you can see an example in Elon Musk once again. He didn't know anything about electric cars. He didn't know anything about rockets. He didn't know anything about Neuralink, although he did recruit the best neuroscientists. He didn't know anything about the Boring Company. He didn't know anything about Twitter or about politics, but he just learned. So whatever Elon can do, you can do, but you have to understand, the 3 critical components of your brain which account for this phenomenon called intelligence. People think that to become smart you have to go to school, you have to get an MBA, or you have to get a PhD, but that's not the only path anymore. You can read books like Elon or Dr. Jordan Peterson, and you can select a response, you take action, and you learn from your results. You can create an entire intelligence system for yourself. And in fact, in a future live stream, I'm going to talk about my strategy for doing precisely that, and it's an ebook that I'm coming out with. It's called Your 4 Brains, and basically I want to teach people how what happened here? Oh, sorry, it just crashed. Anyways, I'm going to end it here, but in a future live stream, I'm going to talk about how you can develop your 4 brains. These are 4 different brains, and you're going to become super intelligent. So anyways, guys, it's been a lot of fun for me. So if you have questions, please put them in the comments below, and I'll talk to you more in the next